We all just heard pretty powerful reporting, courtesy of Mr. Ryan, from many of our wounded troops who were injured in the attack in Kuwait. Mr. Secretary, you heard direct quotes from some of them via CBS's reporting. They were willing to talk to the press. Things like they were unprepared to provide any defense for themselves in the unit. Things like we were moved closer to Iran to a deeply unsafe area that was a known target. Your spokesperson, Sean Parnell, in response to that reporting, said it was not true. Do you agree with that? He was calling these guys liars?
I'm not calling our troops liars, and I don't know if what you're representing is correct or not. I'll take you at your word on that. But all I know is that we took every effort possible at the commencement of this campaign to ensure the defense of our troops, to include moving them off of known bases to places that were not known, and we had intel.
Understood.
This exchange begins with a dispute over accountability. Representative Deluzio is focusing on testimony from wounded service members, while Secretary Hegseth is defending the military's preparations before the attack. The central question is about responsibility. When troops raise concerns after a deadly incident, how should military leadership respond?
Secretary, and then those were fortified with bunkers and other fortifications with theater air defenses. Was our concern that something could
I'm going to pause you there. I'm going to give you a chance.
Absolutely.
Secretary, I'm going to give you a chance.
You're disparaging me that I don't care.
I'm asking you whether you think they're liars or not. That's what I asked you.
You are disparaging me that I don't care about the passing of our troops.
Nope. I asked if you thought they're liars, Secretary.
That's disparaging and smearing in every way. Nobody cares more about the fate of our troops. Nobody cares about the health of our troops. Nobody wants to bring them all hope more than I do.
I understand, but he controls the time. He controls the time. You get to control your answer. And the gentleman's ready.
If we're allowed to answer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Secretary, my question was clear, whether you thought they were liars or not. You don't seem to want to answer it. We can move on. The other part of what your spokesman said, and you just reiterated here, was that, and I'm quoting your spokesman, every possible measure has been taken to safeguard our troops, end quote. You mean to tell us, and I'll give you a chance to clarify, there is not a single additional thing you could have done to protect those troops who are now wounded, 6 of whom are dead?
I'm telling you that as a department, we did every conceivable thing at my level and every echelon down to ensure the maximum force protection for our troops. We live in a dangerous world, in a dangerous place against a determined enemy that can't have a nuclear weapon, and that requires sacrifice and risk. And it tragically, in this case, it meant 6 Americans lost their lives and others were wounded. And we all know that. And that's part of the cost. But it does not mean we didn't care. And it doesn't mean we didn't commit.
I didn't ask you that,
It doesn't mean we didn't do
saying
everything possible, which we did.
But let's be clear about what was done. There were T-walls there, essentially. There was no overhead protection. The known threat in that environment, and I think we all here understand it, is overhead drone strike.
The disagreement has now shifted from what happened to whether more could have been done. Deluzio is challenging the claim that every possible protective measure was taken, while Hegseth argues commanders acted under difficult conditions against a determined enemy. That tension is becoming the heart of the hearing.
There was no protection for overhead drone strikes, so I'm struggling to understand how your answer and your spokesman's answer is that every possible measure was taken. We can move on. Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Kane, I want to ask you something on a different topic. Folks at home know you're the senior military officer in our armed services. They may not have as much of understanding of your role in the chain of command. You're outside the operational chain of command, but you are the President's and the Secretary's senior military advisor. So I want to ask a very basic thing, what you would expect our commanders in the field, our troops to do should the enemy lay down their weapons and try to surrender. What would you expect commanders in the field to do?
Well, sir, I think I'll go back to something I said earlier with deep respect for your question, but I think you're trying to take me to a partisan place here, and I can't let you do that.
General, as always, I respect your desire to avoid it. I'm not trying to put you in a partisan place.
And I know that, but our officers and enlisted service members always follow lawful orders. There's a checklist for them to do that, and I'll stay in the middle.
Very good. Understood, General. Secretary, let me give you a chance. And you've been asked about this earlier. You said it in, I think, your press conference, essentially, and I'll quote you here, no quarter, no mercy for our enemies. That's the end of the quote. Is your guidance that you expect our troops in harm's way, if there's a foreign enemy surrendering, laying down their arms, they're supposed to provide no quarter and kill them?
You denied it, but you were indeed trying to take the chairman to a partisan place. That was General Milley. That was the previous administration, which played politics. We don't play that
It's a
way.
simple question. I'm asking
We
you what
fight
you
to
meant.
win, and we ensure the rules of engagements are such that our troops have every authority possible to.
I'll give you another chance. In saying that, are you trying to tell commanders that that's what you expect? You're in the chain of command. It's a simple question.
I understand that. My commanders know exactly what the guidance is with each and every mission, and they know every tool,
Secretary,
every tool at
in
their disposal to
refusing
be
to
effective.
answer it, I think you speak volumes. I think that's a dangerous thing. We all know the expectations. We know the law of war. We know what is lawful. I'd expect our commanders to understand that as well.
What began as a discussion about force protection quickly evolved into something much larger. A debate over military accountability, civilian leadership, and the legal obligations that govern the use of American military power. Representative Chris Deluzio opened this exchange by referencing reporting and testimony from service members who were wounded during the attack in Kuwait. Rather than focusing immediately on strategic objectives or battlefield outcomes, he focused on something more fundamental: whether the troops on the ground had been adequately protected. That distinction matters. In American military history, some of the most consequential oversight hearings have not centered on whether a mission succeeded or failed. Instead, they have focused on whether military personnel were given the resources, preparation, and protection necessary to carry out that mission safely. From Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan, congressional oversight has repeatedly examined situations where service members raised concerns about equipment, planning, intelligence, or force protection. Deluzio's line of questioning fits squarely within that tradition. The first major issue involved statements reportedly made by wounded personnel who believed they were operating in an exposed position vulnerable to attack. Secretary Hegseth strongly rejected any suggestion that military leaders were indifferent to troop safety and argued that every reasonable measure had been taken to reduce risk. That response reflects a difficult reality of military operations. No commander can eliminate risk entirely. The United States military routinely operates in environments where adversaries possess drones, missiles, rockets, and other capabilities capable of striking even heavily defended positions. The question is rarely whether risk exists. The question is whether that risk was managed appropriately. That is precisely where Deluzio focused his criticism. His argument was not that military leaders intentionally endangered troops. His argument was that the claim that every possible measure had been taken becomes difficult to reconcile if obvious vulnerabilities remained. This debate is especially relevant because drone warfare has transformed modern conflict. Over the past decade, low-cost drones have increasingly challenged traditional military defenses. Conflicts in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and elsewhere have demonstrated that even sophisticated militaries must constantly adapt to evolving aerial threats. As a result, force protection is no longer simply about walls, barriers, or conventional defenses. It increasingly involves counter-drone systems, electronic warfare capabilities, intelligence gathering, and rapid adaptation to changing threats. That broader context helps explain why Deluzio repeatedly returned to the issue of overhead protection. For many military analysts, drone threats have become one of the defining operational challenges of modern warfare. But the hearing then moved into an even more consequential area. The discussion shifted from force protection to the laws of armed conflict. Deluzio referenced a public statement in which Hegseth used the phrase "no quarter, no mercy for our enemies." To many viewers, that phrase may sound like routine political rhetoric. Within military and legal circles, however, the phrase carries far greater significance. Historically, no quarter refers to refusing surrender and denying enemy combatants protections that are recognized under the laws of war. Modern international humanitarian law, including principles recognized by the United States military, places strict limits on how surrendering combatants must be treated. That is why Deluzio repeatedly sought clarification. His concern was not merely about language. It was about whether statements made by senior civilian leaders could be interpreted as guidance regarding military conduct. And that concern becomes particularly significant because the Secretary of Defense occupies a unique position within the American system. Unlike political commentators or campaign figures, the Secretary sits within the actual chain of command. Words spoken by civilian defense leaders can carry operational, legal, and institutional weight. Hegseth's response focused on military professionalism. He repeatedly emphasized that commanders understand the rules of engagement, understand lawful orders, and understand the laws governing armed conflict. That argument reflects a long-standing strength of the American military system. The United States invests heavily in legal training, command accountability, and professional military education designed to ensure compliance with domestic and international law. Supporters of Hegseth's position would argue that commanders are unlikely to misunderstand legal obligations simply because of a rhetorical statement delivered during a press event. Critics, however, would argue that leaders have an obligation to avoid ambiguity altogether. When senior officials use language that appears inconsistent with established military doctrine, even unintentionally, questions naturally arise regarding interpretation and accountability. That concern is not unique to this administration. American history contains numerous examples of controversies involving statements made by civilian and military leaders during wartime. In many cases, the debate was not about whether unlawful conduct occurred. The debate centered on whether leadership language accurately reflected official policy. This hearing ultimately exposed two competing views of leadership. One perspective emphasizes resolve, strength, deterrence, and projecting confidence against adversaries. The other emphasizes precision, legal clarity, and the responsibility that comes with exercising military authority. Neither side is arguing that the United States should abandon military effectiveness. The disagreement concerns how military effectiveness should be communicated and how leaders should speak when discussing armed conflict. That is why this exchange matters beyond the immediate political headlines. The questions Deluzio raised are likely to continue appearing in future oversight hearings, budget reviews, and military policy debates. How should civilian leaders communicate during wartime? What level of precision should be expected when discussing military operations? And when service members raise concerns about protection, preparation, or leadership decisions, how aggressively should Congress investigate those concerns? Those are not partisan questions. They are institutional questions. And institutions often outlast administrations. Perhaps the most revealing moment came when Deluzio repeatedly offered Hegseth opportunities to directly clarify the meaning of the phrase in question. Instead of providing a simple clarification, Hegseth returned to broader themes of military readiness, lawful conduct, and commander professionalism. Supporters will view that response as sufficient. Critics will argue it left the central concern unresolved. That disagreement may ultimately define how this hearing is remembered. Because the most significant oversight hearings are often not remembered for the answers that were given. They are remembered for the questions that remained unanswered. But what do you think? Should senior civilian defense officials be expected to precisely clarify statements that touch on the laws of war, or is it reasonable to trust military commanders to understand the difference between rhetoric and official policy? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you value long-form congressional analysis that goes beyond headlines and examines the oversight battles, military decisions, and accountability questions shaping American national security, make sure to subscribe to Capitol Oversight and turn on notifications so you never miss the next breakdown.